Hi lads, so today we have one of the more heavily requested historical dogfights, taking a look at a very well known matchup from the 1982 Falklands War, with the British Harrier GR.3 fighting against an Argentine A-4B Skyhawk. A lot of people misread the capabilities of the Harrier family, expecting far more of them than is really feasible, and the British success in the Falklands War is definitely a major part of that. While the Royal Navy's Sea Harrier variants leaned more towards use as a defensive fighter aircraft, the primary role of the RAF's Harriers was ground attack, and they were very underwhelming for their time as fighter aircraft. First designed in the 60s based on the Bristol Siddeley Pegasus engine, the Harrier was designed as a subsonic attack platform that could be deployed from small air bases without conventional runways to operate fast jets, or carriers such as the Royal Navy's Invincible class. What the Harrier was not was an air superiority platform. Despite the presence of two AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles and two 30mm Aiden cannons, the Harrier had no radar, was subsonic, and had a very low angle of attack and poor turn rate compared to contemporary generation fighters. The Harrier was an incredibly useful attack platform, with the speed of a conventional jet attacker but the capability to land and take off vertically like a helicopter. However, it should be noted that the first generation of Harriers were unable to take off vertically with full ordnance and fuel load, and did need the rolling start of a short runway. In conflicts where conventional airfields or full-size carriers were in play, Harriers still saw use given their ability to be fielded from far closer to an area of operation. The bases servicing Harriers did not need to be large airfields, but small clearings with just enough space for takeoffs and landings, and various resupply assets. West Germany saw many of these bases, which in truth were little more than roadways in forest clearings, where the Harriers would be useful as a rapid deployment style answer to the threat of advancing Soviet armour during the middle stages of the Cold War. It was envisioned that the Harriers would prove enough of a threat to slow down the ground forces for long enough that more capable conventional aircraft like the Panavia Tornado could be scrambled to properly combat a Soviet offensive. In direct comparison to conventional aircraft, the Harriers lose out in every way, with a much lower carrying capacity than even far older strike aircraft, and they fare poorly in an air-to-air role against a peer-to-peer adversary. What this means is that an aircraft like the A-4B is a far closer contemporary to the Harrier than something more from its own time, such as an F-14 Tomcat. This does not mean that the Harrier is by any means a poor performing or outdated aircraft, and in US Marine Corps service as the AV-8A, the potential for thrust vectoring aiding in defensive maneuvers in dogfights was tested and trained. Known as VIFFing, VIFF standing for Vectoring in Forward Flight, this maneuver is a very last resort, causing the aircraft to lose a huge amount of forward speed by switching the exhaust nozzles of the Pegasus engine to 100 degrees from their standard rearward facing attitude. In theory, this can force a hostile aircraft to overshoot and allow the Harrier a single chance for a gun or missile kill. The idea that the Harrier could use thrust vectoring to out-dogfight an opponent is mostly exaggerated, as while the VIFFing technique, if used at the right time, can result in a slightly higher AOA, pilots will very quickly find their aircraft losing speed and therefore turn rate, and after that first turn, the energy loss means that the aggressor will easily be able to come back in for the kill. In the Falklands, RAF Harrier GR.3s refitted for navalised work were equipped with the AIM-9L Sidewinder missile, and were deployed to defend ground assets from air attack by Mirages and Skyhawks, as well as engaging Argentine artillery placements. The AIM-9L was capable of all aspect locking and was vastly more manoeuvrable than the very early AIM-9Bs used by the Argentine aircraft at the time. Another factor going in favour of the British was the range limitations of the Argentine aircraft. The British task force very quickly took the Argentine Navy out of the conflict, which meant the lack of Argentina's aircraft carrier for jets to operate from. Coupled with the destruction of the sole paved runway on the islands in the Black Buck raids, the Argentine aircraft were forced to deploy from air bases on the mainland, meaning that they had very little loiter time over the Falklands and could only really perform quick hit-and-run attacks on British ships before egressing out of the area. This pretty much disallowed dogfighting, and the Argentine Mirages, for example, had a loiter time of only around 6 minutes over the battlefield. This gave the Harriers a significant advantage as they could abuse the rushed positioning of the Argentine jets or catch them as they attempted to disengage. In total, 23 Argentine aircraft, including 16 A-4s, were shot down by the Harriers during the 10-week conflict, all but one by the Sidewinder missiles, for 0 air-to-air Harrier losses. This video is brought to you by supporters like you. Thanks for helping me keep the lights on. Alright, we are here in the British Aerospace Harrier GR.3. This is the 1982 refit. About to merge with an A-4 Skyhawk over there, flown by my buddy Preed. We are going to try and take him one circle here initially, and the A-4 is going to dunk all over me in this one circle initially, but he's got about 2 good turns in him before he's going to be out of energy, and at that point we're going to be able to hang out above him. He's not going to be able to do much against us. And we're straight into a 2-circle rate fight there. Now, we do have our AIM-9 Sidewinders. He is not carrying AIM-9s. The Argentines were using fairly early versions of the AIM-9 Sidewinder, which are pretty well useless in this fight. But we do not have the AIM-9Ls that were used by the British Harriers in the Falklands. We have the AIM-9G, which are a rear aspect only variant. They still should be nice and useful here though. So hanging out above him, I am actually beating him in this rate fight here, it looks like. We're gonna touch on these thrust vectoring nozzles just gently. But the one thing I do not want to do in this fight is start draining the Harrier of energy, because at lower speeds he is going to maneuver all over me, and if I can't use the vertical against him, we're in big trouble. So I'm just going to drop that nose. The Harrier will turn better at higher airspeeds than the A4. He's actually going to potentially get a shot here if he can whip his nose around quickly enough, but I don't think he quite can. There we go. And we're starting to lose a little bit of airspeed here ourselves. Oh, very, very low to the ground there from the A4. It's getting a little bit dangerous. I'm going to put the nozzles back to full, see if we can use the vertical against him, see if we can lead him up a little bit more. But this is not quite the fight you'd expect from a much more modern aircraft in the Harrier GR.3. And we are a little bit heavier in the 1982 refit than the GR.3 was initially. Just for things like naval equipment and flare pods. But we are not going to nearly compete with the A4 over there in a rate fight. And what I'm actually going to do is go for a little bit of separation, a little bit of a shallower turn here. Try and retain some speed. And yeah, see, that A4 just cannot keep up with me in engine power, but he will dance all over me in a turning dogfight. But the one thing we are definitely not doing here is that I actually pressed the wrong button there and started to use the thrust vectoring in the wrong direction. But these nozzles are actually capable of pointing about 100 degrees, so slightly further forward than straight down. But we are not going to be getting a whole lot of use out of that in this dogfight, because if we do, we're going to end up in a low speed turn fight that the A4 will win easily. I'm actually going to have to worry about this engine. The Harrier does struggle, and he's going to reverse that turn, go into the 1 circle. He may actually get a shot here with guns. Oh, just pulled out of his nose there. We're going to try and force him into the vertical here. But if I end up in a low speed fight with him, even if I start using the thrust vectoring, we just will not have the turn rate. or the turn radius to get onto his 6. And this is actually quite a challenging fight for the Harrier, despite being a much more modern aircraft. Okay, this is a little better. If he tries to come up for me here, he's going to be pretty messed up. But you can see just how difficult it is to get a position over the A4. I'm going to go straight up into the vertical here. And this is usually the last thing you'd want to do in a dogfight, but here we go. That's the chance where I can use the thrust vectoring. Flip our nose over a lot quicker. And now we're going to be sitting on his 6. Warm up a AIM-9 Sidewinder here. Fox 2. That may actually be enough. Yes, there we go. Splash 1. Alright, so that was a pretty successful use of the Harrier against the A4. That is really the only thing you can do in the Harrier against the A4. Going for the marge there. Try and keep it. He's going for the vertical. That is a big mistake for him. We are a little bit late on this turn. But he's going to be out of energy when he comes out of that. And we are just going to keep holding the energy above him. We went cold there. We're going to flip it around for the 1 circle. I'm actually going to try and use the thrust vectoring here. Not fully, just at just over 50%. We'll tone it down a little bit there. And here we go. He is going to be struggling to maneuver. Back down to 0. Keep energy over him. And I'm not sure if we're going to get that Sidewinder kill again. He might have been a little bit surprised at that. Be a little too smart to let me do that a second time. He's actually going to start running me down here. He's gone for gone down to the deck to try and get a little bit of airspeed back. But he should not. Oh, almost put those shots in. Just managed to stay below his nose, but he should not have the opportunity to really do that again. Once again, I'm just going to stay above him and try not to give him that shot. But every time he tries it, he's going to start dropping his energy. I'm going to drop the nose here. He's going to come up again. And I'm going to drop the nose here. And as we start... Oh, he's going to cut that turn in. I'm actually going to go lean more on the thrust vectoring here. And he's just not quite letting me get that 1 circle in. If I try and force this, we may have him here. Oh, little too late. Couldn't quite pull the nose down in time. And now, we may be in a little bit of trouble. I've dropped a lot of speed. He is going to cross in front of my guns here, maybe.
Terrain.
And the Harrier is actually quite difficult to control when you're in full veto mode like this. I'm going to set the nozzles a little bit lower, just like that. That should be enough to help us maintain nose authority at those low speeds. But the Harrier is not very good at that. There's a Fox 2. That's not going to quite have enough pull to avoid that mountain there. This is a bit more of a close range dogfight, which is not what the Harrier likes in this situation, but at this low speed, We may actually be able to use these nozzles, this gimmick, for an advantage here. Here's hoping that this may not be about to turn out as advantageously as it looks like it will. I'm actually going to have to get a little bit more speed here. I don't like this. This is bad. He's going to start pulling around that turn a lot more effectively than I will. But so we're in a two-circle rate fight here, which is not so much about turning radius or turning performance of the aircraft. It is more about energy retention and how fast you can pull around that turn. And the optimal way of doing that in the Harrier is actually to set the nozzles to about 30% or 30 degrees, which is what I've done now. And that's actually how the British pilots were trained to use the Harriers in dogfights. And that's actually how the American pilots found the Harrier to perform best as well. And they used it in flight tests against F-4 Phantoms and F-14 Tomcats even, and found the viffing technique, as it's known, to actually be somewhat useful. However, in this particular scenario, against an aircraft as nimble as the A-4 there, oh, this could be a problem. We cross in front of his nose. Okay, that was quite lucky on the air brake there. He's going to try and do the same thing, I bet. If I can get the nose up here. Come on, Harrier, work with me. Oh, I'm fully hovering at the moment. We're going to go for a little bit more speed. He's struggling to maintain nose authority there as well. We're gonna get a missile ready. And he's slightly terrain masking there, which is a problem. I'm not gonna be able to get that off in time. Damn. As we pop out here, get rid of that air brake. And there he is. He's trying a terrain mask, which is actually very smart. Because he did not have the airspeed there to be able to dodge my Sidewinder if I'd have got it off. And now we're back in this fight over the terrain. And once again, at about 30-35 degrees, we should be able to pull around the turn quicker than he will, especially at these airspeeds. The only thing I want to be careful about is coming in at too high of an aspect to get a shot off. As we come in closer, I'm going to set those nozzles a little bit more aggressively. And try not to lose too much speed doing it, which is the problem we had last time. But he is really going to be getting some losing cues now. I just wish I had a radar with the Harrier so that I could lock these Sidewinders a little bit quicker. He's going to go full on into the vertical. I think that is a bit of a Hail Mary. As he comes down, he... Oh shit, that thing is very, very nimble. If I'd have kept going there, we would have crossed in front of his guns before he crossed in front of mine. Damn, okay, we'll try with the missiles. Fox 2. And that's gonna get him. Yes. lads, so as always, in lieu of having TAC view working for War Thunder, we're going to have a look at the replay match here just to kind of get a sense of what was happening. This is our second match, and as we've gone for the merge, we have immediately gone for a one circle vertical fight with the A4 here, flown by Preed. Now, Preed is an exceptionally good dogfighter. When I made my last dogfight video talking about how the Draken completely outperforms most other aircraft in a turning dogfight, Preed rocked up in our next live stream and challenged me to a Draken versus MiG-21 fight and absolutely wiped the floor with me. So he is actually a very, very capable dogfighter, and in that regard, there was absolutely no way I was winning a maneuvering dogfight with him in the Harrier. It just does not have the energy retention, the angle of attack, or the turn rate in general to be able to win a traditional dogfight. Instead, what we're going to do is try and use the vertical against him. We've immediately out of the gate come for a vertical one circle fight. So if you imagine this is the merge, we've flown in here and we've gone up, he's gone up, and he is going to pull a lot tighter than we will, and we've actually come up quite high above him, which is where we are now. And the reason for doing this is because the Harrier and the A4 actually has better maneuvering energy retention than the Harrier, meaning that pulling a turn of the same radius, he is going to be able to maintain a higher speed than I will, or in other words, pulling a turn and maintaining the same speed, he is going to have a tighter turn than me. In the vertical, however, the thrust to weight advantage of the Harrier really allows you to get better of the A4, the lower powered aircraft in this scenario. Now you may notice we are using the A4E and not the A4B, which I mentioned in the intro. That is the variant that the Argentine Air Force were using at the time, actually the A4P, which was based on the A4B. Unfortunately, however, there is a visual bug with the A4B's Rato rockets right now, which means that the flame effect actually shows up all through the replay, even though those rocket boosters only burn for about 4 seconds. It's just a visual bug, and instead we decided to use the A4E, which does have a camouflage a little closer to the Argentine camo that they were using in 1982. So at this stage we're actually cold, which means our noses are pointed away from each other rather than coming in a turn that crossed each other like a second merge like that. We were actually more like this, or if I draw that a little better. We've come around like this, turning this way, Preed's come around like this, and we actually never crossed over each other. So what we're going to have the space to do now is immediately reverse that turn and use the one circle against him again. So we both reversed our turns, we're both back into a one circle fight. That is going to be about angle of attack and turning radius, which in the vertical, the Harrier can actually stand a chance of winning. Going to do it one more time, and immediately, because Preed's got enough energy, and we're sitting at about 500 kilometers an hour. He's at, what is he? 378. So he's a little bit lower than us, but he's got enough that if we tried to reverse that turn one more time, he would have had us with guns as we passed in front of him like that. He would have just shot me here. So immediately what we're going to do is try and put a little bit of distance between us and him. Once again, using the vertical, try to bleed him of his energy without losing as much ourselves. I'm using the thrust vectoring nozzles a little bit just to get a little bit tighter turn, setting them to about 25-30% there, or 30 degrees, so as to balance a tighter turning circle with not losing too much energy, because the last thing I want to do in this fight is allow the A4 to get an energy advantage over me, because once he does, it's all over. He does manage to put a couple of shots in my direction, doesn't manage to connect them, and at this stage he has lost a lot of energy coming into that vertical, and I am still sitting pretty above him with a nice energy advantage. We're going to drop the nose here. Once again, didn't quite have enough room to get onto his 6 there, but now he's going to reverse that turn, saying that this time I am actually going to be outrating him. He reverses the turn, goes for the one circle. I would have managed to put shots in here if I'd have continued that turn around. Instead, I'm going to put us into the horizontal and try and come up a little bit above him, stay above his nose, so that he can't put shots in this way. He's going to pass underneath me. I'm immediately going to come up and reverse that turn and try and get a little bit of a pincer movement down on top of him. So what's going to happen is as he passes underneath me, I couldn't quite reverse that turn immediately. I'm going to wait a little bit for him to pass in front and immediately use the thrust vectoring nozzles, which actually work a lot better to adjust your direction of flight when you point them upwards rather than pointing them downwards, because of course you're not fighting against the forces of gravity. So I've got the thrust vectoring, all the thrust from these engines is coming up right now, which means my aircraft is just plummeting like a stone, and that's actually going to help us pull our nose on target a little bit quicker. Unfortunately, not quite enough. I was trying to use the rudder. I don't know if it actually is easy to see there, but the rudder, I'm trying to actually kick that nose out in this direction. Like that, see if we can get a shot in as he passes around here. Unfortunately, I didn't quite manage to do it in time, and oops, he's gonna escape there. Here, he actually makes a pretty deadly mistake. He's above me here. I'm not sure what our energy states are. I'm at 231 kilometers an hour. He's at 300, and he's actually air braking here to try and point his nose down like this. As I pass underneath him, he's gonna be able to point down like that and get a shot into me here. Unfortunately, that's not going to work out because I am still on the thrust vectoring, and effectively when you are using thrust vectoring in the Harrier in a regular kind of aspect like we are now, horizontally, it doesn't do a whole lot aside from air brake you. So we are losing speed doing this, but that is only going to allow us to turn tighter. Meanwhile, Preed has secured an energy advantage and is not using it because he's trying to air brake to reverse the turn and come back down on top of me. So unfortunately for him, if he'd have continued to use the speed, come around me, he would have been able to fly all the way around this circle like that and come around at me. I'm either heading this way, in which case he's just going to put shots into me here, or I'm heading this way, in which case he's going to be able to latch on my 6. And in the Harrier, aside from trying to use the vertical, which would be a very significant gamble, I'm not going to be able to do anything to get him off my 6 if he is able to latch onto it. So this was a bit of a mistake. Unfortunately, the Harrier, once you're using the VTOL nozzles, if I'd have come off VTOL, we would have simply stalled out the aircraft. The nose would have dropped down like this. Which is kind of why Preed's done this. He's passed in front of the nose, but he's passed in this direction, which is going to make it very, very difficult for me to get guns on target. I could either use the rudder and turn over. We're a little bit high speed, 180 kilometers an hour, to simply rudder turn over like a helicopter and put guns on target here. Instead, what would happen is I'd likely stall out the aircraft, drop down that way, and he's going to pass in front of me here. I almost got the shot off because I stayed with the VTOL and just tried to maneuver the aircraft regularly, but we're a little bit behind, a little bit too far to the left in that shot. However, here I'm able to drop the nose very, very quickly and pull onto his 6, and he would have been very, very shocked that I managed to pull that maneuver. Unfortunately, our Sidewinder that we tried to launch didn't quite, that's a little bit of a replay bug, didn't quite have the pull. These AIM-9Gs do not really pull very well at all until they accelerate. So they can be a little bit difficult to use. Now we are in more of a rate fight, and I am a little bit too tight on the nozzles here to be able to maintain the energy over him. And of course in the horizontal, he is going to have every single advantage over me in a maneuvering dogfight. He's going to have better energy retention, he's going to have a tighter turn, he's going to be more maneuverable, he's going to be more coordinated with his turns, whilst we're wobbling all over the place here. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the aircraft into the vertical, try and either bait him to come up, which is going to lose him energy, or if he continues this turn around, staying at his own altitude, I am going to be able to come up a little bit higher and simply drop that nose and try and catch him around here. And once an aircraft latches onto your 6, there is plenty the A-4 can do against the Harrier, much more than the Harrier can do against the A-4, but it is going to be very, very difficult to get them off, especially when we have these Sidewinders. So we're just following him through the rate fight here. We are winning this one, just by using the altitude advantage over him, as well as using the thrust vectoring nozzles at the right time. Now that he's reversed the turn, I am fully leaning on these nozzles. As you can see, they are pointed fully downwards to allow us to brake harder than him and pull the nose around tighter. If he'd have continued that turn around this way, we would have been able to turn the nose up very, very quickly and follow him. Instead, he's come up like that, and I'm going to be able to brake harder than him by using those nozzles at the right time. Almost worked there. unfortunately, I was not quick enough on the Sidewinder here. If I'd have launched about here, he would have been dead right there. However, I was not able to lock onto him until about here, and he's terrain masking. My missile would have sailed right into this ridgeline here instead of actually going for him. And now he's trying to get some separation, which he does kind of manage to do. However, he is kind of using the terrain for a vertical, which is actually helping me more than it's helping him. So another little mistake on his part. If he'd have just kept any horizontal aspect around, I would have been forced to waste time going up to then use the exact same advantage that we were using before. Instead, he keeps dropping his nose once he comes over this ridgeline, heading down into the ravine there, which is only helping me. And as he sees that that's happening, he's gonna try and do something about it here by going into the vertical. Bit of a last-ditch effort. And as he comes up, we're going to try and match him. I'm a little bit too slow, and once again, if I'd have just come off the VTOL nozzles here, and at the moment they're pointing this way, if I'd have just swung them back around this way, our aircraft would have just stalled out, and he would have been able to stall on top of us and come down for the kill. So it's very, very important to know when to come off those nozzles. Instead, I use them to come back this way, so we're actually, our thrust is pointing our aircraft. If you imagine, here's the line of our aircraft trajectory, and gravity is actually pulling us this way. So the fact that we are pointing this way is actually going to help us pull this nose over there and then fall down back on top of him, which is exactly what we're going to do. As he comes around there, we're going to drop that nose over the top of him, and immediately I have a very, very advantageous position. At this point, he is absolutely dead. There is nothing he can do against me, and although I didn't quite manage to walk the tracers onto him, quick Sidewinder shot, and there he goes. Splash 1 Argentine A-4 Skyhawk. Preed is a very, very good dogfighter, and that meant that this was not a traditional dogfight. I had to pretty much stick above him, especially like we did in that first engagement. Preed was kind of forced to try and fight me in the vertical, because if he had left me to have that vertical advantage from the get-go, we would have done exactly the same thing that we did in our first match, which is just sit on top of him and drop a missile down onto him with absolutely no way he could do anything about it. It's absolutely fine if you're able to prevent them getting guns on target, but it's your job to kill them at the same time too. Which is why the idea of going for separation in these dogfights, which a lot of people suggested in the comments of the last few videos, does not work in these 1v1 scenarios. We do have a maximum radius. There is a capture point here. If you leave that, you are forfeiting the fight. As well as the fact that if you do leave and then try and come back in, you are just going to end up in endless head-on passes, and that's really a 50-50 chance at getting a kill. I know people are going to say, oh, well, if you're better at head-ons, it's more than a 50-50, but I don't know how good Preed is at head-ons either. He may very well be as good, if not better than me, so it is actually just a 50-50 shot for a kill. I'm more keen on outmaneuvering and outfighting him as a pilot, rather than just trying to use the engine power to outperform his aircraft. There's really no fun and no skill to that, and if it just ends up in head-on passes, then it is effectively gambling. Instead, we were able to use the advantages of the Harrier to actually offset the numerous advantages the A-4 has over this aircraft in a turning dogfight, and actually outmaneuver him. Did take a little while, but it was actually a very, very enjoyable fight. So thank you very much to Preed for coming and helping us out there. Other than that, I hope you have enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did, subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you lads on the battlefield. Yeah, I'm not quite low speed enough yet to use the thrust vectoring. Oof. Now I can do it. Now I can do it. Oh, no, okay, no. Come on. Just keep it fucking inverted. Oh yes, go around him. Yes!